Today we've got quite a big one, quite a doozy. We're coming out of an election cycle that for many has felt like it's lasted years, and indeed it might have, from the many campaigns that we've seen in the run-up to August 2022 to the election itself. Now we have a president-elect. At some point in time, we will know whether the Supreme Court upholds William Ruto's victory or overturns it. We'll know that fairly soon. But the wolf at the gate is no longer who becomes the next president, but who is going to be able to resolve the myriad challenges in our economy. There's debt, there's low productivity in agriculture, there's post-COVID recovery. There's all of these things that many people are concerned about. There's also unemployment of young people. Bloomberg were looking at the International Labour Office report on unemployment in this country, putting it at 14%, double what our government has posted at the figures as the figures for unemployment. So it's definitely something that needs to be spoken about, something that needs to be continuously drummed in, and we've got a great guest to be able to help us discuss this today. Former Director General in the Kenya National Debt Office at the Treasury, Mr. Wohoro Ndoro. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciated. And of course, on this show, we are consistently trying to debunk fake news, misinformation, and disinformation out there on various topics. The topic today, of course, is our economy. And we've got the ever effervescent Tracy Bonareri here to do that for us this morning. Tracy, tell us what you've got lined up for us this morning.
Judging by the topic of discussion today, we're going to be discussing domestic debt, the GDP, external and internal borrowing, just a couple of claims that have been made by politicians on what the exact figures are under the said topics.
Okay. You, perhaps more than other people, can appreciate the situation that we are in. You have been, so to speak, at the coalface of the issues that are confronting us. But I'll ask this anyway. Do we really appreciate what the situation is like as a country? Do you think that Kenyans really, truly appreciate the situation that we're in? And what is that situation?
What's happened in the last 5 years, and something that I've really come to appreciate, the things when you're in the country, and I like comparing Kenya to the kid who goes to school and carries, their lunch is sandwiches, sandwiches and an apple in a nice plastic lunch box. In a class, everyone else comes with githeri for lunch.
So Kenya is a group
there
of
are many ways
child.
Kenya is like that kid with the sandwiches complaining about, because if you're in a context of Africa, there are things to celebrate. One among these conversations is that for the last basically 5 years more, there's been such a public debate around debt and the government's responsibility that the government has actually had to respond to it, and not respond to it, sort of with flippantly, but with a lot of depth. You recall about just over a year ago when Kenyans on Twitter, the monster, Kenyans are quite a monster on Twitter, actually caused the IMF to change direction because of the issue of debt. So the short answer is there is a lot of issues to be concerned about. But if there's any population that's been on top of it in terms of holding or trying to hold its government accountable, it's been the Kenyans. And in a sense, we can celebrate that fact. The other thing is that because of it being continually in the public space, it's actually become a policy issue even in the election. And if you notice, of all the elections we've had, this has been the most policy-driven one we've ever had. And so to that extent, I celebrate those features about our population. But to your hard question, yes, it's something to be concerned about. There are two things that are very interesting about public debt that's different from private debt. Normally, if you max out your credit card, you could replace it with a new one. But at some point, the bank stops giving you a credit card.
It'll catch up with you.
Right. Public debt is different in this. You get to borrow and spend it, but someone else gets to pay it. It's a moral hazard of public debt. And that is at the heart of why this debate will be continuing for a long, long time. Because a lot of it has to do with the discipline of a government to make sure that it stays within given parameters. But because of that moral hazard, that the person who incurs the debt is not the one who gets to pay it. It means it's a perennial issue. It's a perennial temptation when you're in power. Yeah. But it's also a perennial issue for the rest of us who see it being spent and really don't have much say in terms of what happens to it. In fact, that is the third part to that debt thing, is that you get to spend it and you don't really have to account for it when you're the executive of a government like ours. So it's a good conversation to be having. Again, a pretty obvious question based on your answer. You were in the National Debt Office. Right. How disciplined is the government when it comes to the use of our resources? Tricky question, but the short answer is it started extremely disciplined. In fact, if you remember, we carried over from the Kibaki, and the Kibaki era was basically no debt, very little debt. 2G Tege, maybe for those of you who remember at the time, he brought this idea that we can depend on our own revenue. And when he came in after Moi, we had a total debt of about 300 billion. Sorry, we talk about GDP. The GDP was 300 billion. By the time he left, he could almost quadruple it to about 1 trillion. And for the first time in a very long time, Kenya was actually self-financing. And he said he could only do that by turning to ensuring you grow the economy so that the government can borrow more. With the Wohoro Ndoro administration, then the flag was pretty much open, because they said whatever Kibaki did for infrastructure development, they were going to outdo him, and they did. And basically, we've been on a 20-year building boom. And so, to your question, we can see where a lot of that money has gone. The question whether we should have spent as much, I mean, we could have costed it differently, and was it really necessary to basically focus on the projects they did. Tell us, how bad is it? Like when you're in there and you're looking at projects being, put together, where does the graft animal begin to feed off our resources, and how do we restrain it? What would be surprising to a lot of Kenyans is that the processes within the Treasury for the management, or not just that, but our budget, are extremely well defined. And so, to a large extent, it's never about the process there. It's the fact that the decisions around who gets what are made elsewhere, and ours is to implement. Where is that elsewhere? That elsewhere is in the political space, either in State House or the minister's office or other places. Decisions are made there. Always remember that I've said this before, that a president is like a surgeon. The scalpel he holds in his hands is called the public service. If you look to the public service, be careful not to blame the tool. Ask who's holding the tools. And one of the issues around part of the big debate now, even with the politicians, the political, what we've just come through, is a question of what style of surgeon do you want? You want someone who is disciplined, someone who's skillful at using that tool, and someone who's accountable. And our journey to accountability has been a 50-year journey. Clearly, we are nowhere close to where we should be. And a lot of the questions that we're asking, not just in this program, but in a lot of forums, has brought it to the fore in terms of what needs to happen. And if you notice that there's one thing that both camps were very clear about, was the whole issue of governance. Guys, if you missed the analogy, the surgeon is the president. That's who Wohoro is talking about, and the state essentially, right? Again, just to continue on this issue of corruption. We have seen how endemic it's become across the board in government services, and I'm wondering, looking forward, if it doesn't stop, if it's not brought under control, when do you foretell that final straw being put on our backs and people saying, no more? To a large extent, we are there. We're already there. We are there. But I qualify by saying we're there pretty much as a middle class issue. it's not trickling down to the Mwananchi, and the connection is now being made between the price of unga and this corruption. And it's at that point that made this election we've just come through particularly significant. Is that for the first time you had some of the grassroots saying, the cost of this unga and what you guys are doing with my money is becoming a problem. And so one of the manifestations of that would be the level of scrutiny and public pushback with what the next administration is coming. And you'll notice what has happened is, of course, Bwana Ruto has been very clear that he's going to run a very tight and disciplined government. Now, tight and disciplined is all well and good, but the issues around curtailing or the issues around improving governance in terms of how the money is spent has also now become an issue for the public square. And I think to the extent which, beyond just these debates, is what would Mwananchi on the ground actually get to do. And I'll say it will really we'll begin to see it a lot, especially in the county governments. Yes.
You know, William Ruto has promised a bottom-up approach to growing the economy, being able to restore our place in terms of debt, etc., taming corruption. You know, the Azimio la Umoja coalition also promised a different path in a sense, mainly focused through agriculture and social welfare, etc. Both of them have hefty price tags, like hefty. Hefty realistic or hefty, you know, pie in the sky? Is this something that actually can happen? Can we look forward to William Ruto at the end of year 3 or year 4 saying, look at what my Hustler Fund has done?
The short answer to your question is that I don't think he has an alternative than to do it. The nature of the restiveness in the population will not allow him to not begin to deliver that. What is particularly interesting about his is that he's saying that we are going to help. We're shifting, we're pivoting away from infrastructure to common Mwananchi. And not just common Mwananchi, grassroots Mwananchi. We're going to help him or her. But secondly, we're also going to pivot away from the infrastructure sector to the most important sector in Kenya, which is agriculture. So between those two, he's saying because where the focus of government programs and largesse will be, then in a sense there's a lot more to look forward to. The question of funding it, then several things must happen. One, the whole efficiency around the public service. I keep saying this, and I'm not a popular person for saying that. But the reality is the public service is about 600,000. If you take the army or the teachers or the public servants, they come to about 600,000. In a population of 54 million, we spend just under 1 trillion shillings on 600,000 people. It's kind of about 1 million or more per person per year. That is a very big conversation. So there's a sense in which a rationalization of that will have to happen to free up funds. The second really big one, of course, is borrowing and cutting back from borrowing. But before you can cut back on borrowing, there's a twin to it, and that is your revenue. And I can tell you for free that the KRA will go into hyperdrive. We'll go to hyperdrive, but let me finish.
You've just given me like the shivers. Because running a small business and just that new ETR machine alone is something that's breaking people's back. So that's given me a bit of the jitters, but please continue.
I tell you, it has to happen. But that's where the most sensitive part of this political program will be around funding. And that has to be, and the Kenya Kwanza Brigade have been quite clear, there's a very big gap between the size of our population and people who are economically employed and how much the government collects. And so the question is that most of that and that's been the magic of Africa. That's the reason why all our GDP numbers make no sense, to be honest, because they don't count the informal sector. If you're telling us that our formal sector is, Kenya's an economy of 100 billion US, the truth is we're probably 3 times that. The challenge is saying as a government there is a golden goose out there, but how much can it take? And I think they've been quite clear, especially Kwanzaa, that they will find a way to collect. The issue that has been a problem for us is that part of the pain we are getting from taxation now has been the overemphasis on the formal sector. When you're a formal sector business, then you felt the incidence of the burden much greater than you should.
Because they can find you, they know where you are, they
That's
have your
right.
email address,
they have all of those things.
Yeah.
Now, the wisdom in this new administration will be to say, how do you lighten that? But you only lighten that by also finding other places you can collect.
Yeah.
Which means that if you're running an informal side hustle, you're likely to come on the radar soon. Now, how do you keep them honest? It's not enough that they collect. It's all a circular thing, because it's not how much they collect, it's how they spend it.
How they spend it, yeah.
If they're going to spend it on growing small businesses or giving them the Hustler Fund and other funds, then this could actually grow the pie. The one conversation we've not been having for the last 5 years is growing
the pie.
The size of the pie.
Tracy, you've been following this, right? And Africa Uncensored through Piga Firimbi has been doing numerous fact checks about our debt position, about the size of our economy, etc. Let her rip on what you've found so far.
During his campaigns, the president-elect, William Ruto, has been talking about how the handshake has had an impact on the national debt. So here, he claims, during the presidential debate, he claimed that in their first term, they had borrowed 2.2 trillion. And from 2017, when the handshake happened, they have now borrowed 4.2 trillion. So, at Piga Firimbi, we collected data, and for the financial year, 2017-2018, debt stood at 4.406 trillion, which is a 2.499 trillion increase from what was there in 2013. And since 2017, in 2013, the debt was 1.9 trillion, like Ruto says. So, according to this, we also have the screen grabs there. You can find them on our Piga Firimbi page. So, the screen grabs, this is data from the CBK website. It actually shows that what Ruto said is mostly true. The only difference is the measly percentages, but his digits were true. We can't entirely blame it on the handshake, but the figures he gave are true.
Perhaps that's the context, right?
Yes.
So relating it to the handshake as opposed to what government, because government policy doesn't just make an about turn.
Yes.
You know, you will have made plans to have borrowed over time. So we were going down the path, that the two paths really that the incoming government would choose. One towards growing the pie, and the other more along the lines of what it's already done. Where does this one lead?
If Banaruto runs a very disciplined administration, a good number of those leakages will be taken care of very, very easily because of accountability. The question then becomes, if they are efficient, then the same shilling spent on an efficient administration will go much, much further. But if they also stay out of domestic borrowing, if it's done, for example, if that efficiency then leads to better revenue collection, better deployment of that revenue, more targeted expenditure, more productive, targeted expenditure in productive sectors, and at the same time they're also not borrowing from the domestic market, the compounding effect of that could be huge. And in fact, that's why part of the reason why the other day in a different show I talked about an economic revolution. That's possible. That's possible if those two are aligned together. Clearly what's going to happen now, though, in the meantime, is in sending the signal that a very efficient government is coming, there's a whole other sector of the economy that's preparing to either avoid or run away or do other things. And in a sense, this interim time between administrations could also be quite tricky for the coming administration. I'm sure there's some people now who've already exported their billions to Jersey or some funny island out there. So then I bring the last item, and this is one of I'm really curious to see is the international community's response to a Ruto government. If those efficiencies are seen, then he may find that he has gained a lot of goodwill to even repatriate some of that, those funds that have been lost.
Yeah.
But we must keep everyone honest. So the question is, does Mwananchi sit back? No. I think one of the things that might be a very good development this time around is having an effective opposition. That's been a huge miss for us in the last 5 years. It's been a gap.
It's been a serious gap. Yeah. You have spoken about rationalization, right? And that's in the public service, right? But I'm not in the public service. I'm feeling the impacts of our debt, of the corruption, etc., in my home. How much further does this extend? So what does it look like when I look into my pantry, into our granaries, etc., over the next few years? What should we be prepared to feel?
Your greatest antidote to subsidies is efficiency, is productivity. For example, the cost of unga is high, but our agricultural sector has been completely dominated by cartels, who, by definition, want to keep prices at the level they are.
Yeah.
The moment you break the cartels in agriculture, and all of us get to compete to to produce food, we compete down the price of food. And so, in some ways, a subsidy is a short-term band-aid for a longer productivity problem. And everything I've seen so far with where this administration seems to be going is precisely towards fixing that.
Yeah.
But for you as an individual, as a citizen, I very strongly recommend becoming what I call creative in your, and Kenyans are creative anyway, but creating, the whole side hustle movement is going to go into high gear. But even as it goes into high gear, I mean, for example, if you've got this, the government focusing on agriculture, right now, challenge every Kenyan. Start thinking, go back to that manifesto and look and say, what is the government going to be doing in agriculture? And that little piece of land I have there, especially if I can aggregate with others, what can we do with it now? And look out to benefit from those sort of government programs. Don't wait to be invited. That's why citizens need to change. We stop waiting for our parent called the government to open our mouths and feed us. Yeah. We have to go there every day and say, okay, I'm ready, I've got 10 acres, what do I do? What's your program for this area, for that area? Who should I talk to? Give me a name, give me a location, give me a phone number. A proactive citizenry, I think, is the best antidote for this panic that we're feeling. Because if you continue to be passive, then eventually someone will get some demagogue coming and creating a man of problems. And so I can't emphasize enough the need to be extremely proactive as Kenyans and not to wait for the government to tell us to come now. After all, it's our money. After all, it's our money.
True.
So to me, the message is be positive, but be proactive.
Okay.
To me, Kenya is at a place, we're at a much better place because you're already entrepreneurial. And we must, I think, begin to push back against the panic gospel, because it's true, things are bad. But it's usually at such moments that our genius comes out. And to me, that's really the space I'm emphasizing a lot more. Fact-checking is very useful, but once you start fact-checking what the government is doing. For example, they've told us they're going to give us 50 billion every year, right? That should be in every one of you. I'm talking to the young people around this room. You should tomorrow find out where that 50 billion is going to be and what's the process for getting it. And whatever they tell you, don't believe it until you verified yourself. Go and ask which office. Get a phone number.
Who is the person?
Who is the person you're talking to? 37 million Kenyans are below the age of 35. If they're about to give you 50 billion every year as a fund to access it, okay, take two thoughts. One, that's my money. If I'm a Kenyan, I'm entitled to the money. Secondly, I better be in a viable business, but it's not going to be a free ride. But if I do, then the only thing you need to know is where is it going? Who should I talk to? What's your phone number? What's your location? and that's that holding our government accountable more in that sort of way.
Yeah.
Not so much through our representatives,
Yeah.
but same here citizens.
But ourselves.
What's the phrase? What have you done for me?
What have you done for me lately?
Lately.
Yeah.
That's the question you should be asking.
We have spoken about, and you alluded to it, that people would be spiriting off wealth to tax havens, etc. I mean, we've covered it here with the Pandora Papers, etc. How much energy should the government spend on looking for that money, as opposed to the ever-present challenges that they have?
Oh, no. The focus should be 100% here.
Yeah.
That is a very specialized effort. So
Yeah.
there's a unit even in government that does that. It's going to be funded, should be funded very well, and should be given, again, it should have the face of Kenya, especially the youthful face of Kenya, to go after that money. It's also fairly dangerous money because those are people of means. They will not quite let you go for it.
Just go and take
Happily for us, though, the international framework has changed. And increasingly, a lot of these international organizations and governments are very proactive in helping us recover those funds. So to that extent, in a sense, it may not be as painful, and that we will get even bigger muscles from the American government and others helping us.
Yeah.
But the government's focus should be absolutely here.
And we should also be focused here as well.
The question about accountability has to change. And I've been saying it for a long time now that you cannot be saying accountability is left to the NGOs, the Wanjiru, the Gekonyos of this world and others. It should be the best way to hold everyone accountable. You as a parent know, the best way you're held accountable every day is your kid come and says, I'm hungry.
Yeah, that's true.
Feed me. My shoes have holes. That's accountability that we as a citizen need to change. It cannot be a third party. It must be us directly assuming and walking to offices for the services that belong to us. And I'll finish with this. Another way we must change the narrative of Kenya to stop being complainers is whenever at the interface between the public and the public service should be radically reformed. And it's reformed by us, the public. In other words, if you go for a government service and the person on the other side of that counter is rude, even if they're on another counter, you as the members of the public should call that person out, that public servant. Because to me, we've been too passive in our idea of accountability, and it needs to be a citizen-driven one. And it's only citizen-driven if the citizens say, will not take this lying down. If I come and I need service, expect good manners. It might be a small thing. But if you're 20,000 on this side, and let's say there are 100 of us still looking for a service, and there are 10 on the other side, and one of the clerk is saying,
You made a lunch and they hang their coat.
They don't even bother to use their fingers. They do with your mouth. No, surely. It's a silly example. But at the rubber meets the road where the public service meets the public, but meets a public that says, no, you're not doing me a favor. You're here to serve us. To serve me. That's a message I'm now preaching everywhere. We must stop waiting for the NGOs to come and do this work for us. It has to be that we, at every point we interact with the public service, tell them, game over. You do it. You are here to be a public servant.
Stop being silent about it. Excellent way to end this conversation, Wohoro. Thank you so much. Tracy, I know we said we'd come back and forth, but what are the last two that you have very quickly?
I'll have two.
Yes.
One from Uhuru, who's the outgoing president, and another one made by the president-elect, William Ruto. So he said during the debate as well that around 70-80% of all our borrowing is actually domestic. A main reason as to why we get misled by all these things is because a huge chunk of the population doesn't understand these terminologies that they use. So, domestic debt has been explained, piga firimbi, you go check it there. So, according to the Central Bank of Kenya's quarterly economic review for January to March 2022, the share of domestic debt stood at 4.9%.
Or is it 49 or 4.9?
Oh, sorry, 49. Wow, fact checker. 49.9 of the total national debt. And also, public debt data on the CBK also aligns with what is given here. So, meaning the claims made by the deputy president were false. And the last one for the day is one made by Uhuru on his final Madaraka Day speech. So here, you can see it. Yeah. He said, we have almost tripled wealth in our nation. Like we mentioned in a previous episode, he's always putting 2013, 2017, and like that, juxtaposing those events. So in this fact check, we found that on the GDP claim, an update given by the Minister of Treasury, which is Ukuriatani.
Yes.
The growth was at 155% from 5.3 trillion in 2013 to 13.5 trillion in 2022. However, this claim by Ukuri was also fact-checked. So the data given by Ukuri on 2013 was wrong. So he gave 5.3 trillion, which is inaccurate. According to the KNBS economic survey, it's actually the 5.3 mentioned was for 2014. So for 2013, it was 4.76 trillion.
Okay.
That's all we had for you today.
All right. Thank you, Tracy. I mean, there's lots to learn but I think that the thing that I like about these fact checks is that it's directing people to where they can find this information about what the position of our debt is, our domestic borrowing, how much it is. We also need to start visiting the central bank's data a lot more and start to question it, start to interrogate it, so that we're not taken for a ride and then 5 years later we're told, okay, now we're going to do the same thing again. Wohoro, I wanted to say thank you very much, but how we say thank you here isn't just by shaking your hand, right? We have Louis over here.
You do a dance.
No, the dance we'll save for TikTok. That one's coming. Don't worry. Yeah, but he's been taking a look at you and the things that you've been saying, and so this is a caricature of Mr. Wohoro as he's spoken to us today. Yeah, just our way of saying so thank you very much.
Okay. This is for the wall.
Yes, it's going to be on the wall, but we'll also give you a copy as well. Yeah, so you can just take a hold of it up like there. Yes, yeah, just holding. Yes. As proof that we gave, so that it can't be fact-checked later. He's here holding the caricature. Yeah. Folks, what an interesting conversation. One that we've learned quite a bit. First aid, don't panic. The situation is bad, don't panic. Number 2, be proactive. Number 3, hold your government's feet to the fire. If there's anything that we cannot agree more with you, Wohoro, is that needs to happen more consistently and more directly. If we hold our government's feet to the fire, then we will get the benefits of an efficient government, an effective government, one that delivers prosperity for all of us, not just some of us. And here on the big picture, we really agree with that and we stand by it. Lots more episodes coming through on our YouTube channel. You'll see snippets of this on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter as well, at Africa Uncensored, as well as a lot more of our work, our investigative and in-depth work. So if you haven't subscribed, once again, please do subscribe. And for the work that Tracy, Nyakerario, Lindangare, and the entire team at Piga Firimbi are doing, just go to www.pigafirimbi.africauncensored.online for plenty of fact checks, not just on the economy, but on different things that will help you navigate your way through life on an everyday basis. My name is John-Allan Namu. We'll catch you on the next episode. Asante.